I like how it pops up like, like looking for something to do, start a game or video instantly because you're bored with what you're doing. So it gives you
Yeah,
like
you
other
can play like
opportunities to do
chess and
things.
stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah, cool. I'm not really interested in talking to you guys. I just want to go and play a
Yeah.
game.
Yeah.
Yeah. Chess
Okay.
with Daredevil writer DG
Exactly.
Chichester.
It's like the Queen's Gambit for like,
It's just silent for 5 minutes, and then
Yeah,
everyone's
the whole
"No,
the
good
whole
move."
the whole interview is just so DG. Do you hold on? I'm playing.
wait, wait.
E7.
King,
Damn
kingpin to pawn 4. Yeah.
Oh,
it. They should make a Daredevil chess set. Okay, I'm
I
gonna make sure.
know. There should be actually. It'd be kind of like a pretty cool idea, like a Hell's Kitchen cassette. Bullseye's like the rook, and
mm-hmm.
Ben
Okay.
Urich is like the bishop. You can do that. You can
Oh.
make it work.
Well, they should make like Father Lantom from the show a bishop. Isn't that what a bishop is? It's like a religious guy.
Exactly. Yeah. You got lots of opportunities.
Okay.
Mix it up. They've got all those great
ahead.
like figures, smashing through glass and the half bust and stuff. So why not?
Okay. Welcome back to Kaboom. Today is very special. We have a special guest for the first time. We have DG Chichester, writer of Daredevil, writer of other stuff, Elektra, Evil, Daredevil, Black Armor being the newest thing he's working on. Thank you for coming on here.
That's great. I'm happy to be here. Thanks for having me on. Am I the first guest, or you mean the first time I'm a guest here?
Both.
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 Yeah.
Wow. All right. Well, a double hitter. So cool. That's great.
Yeah.
Good to see both of you again. I'm glad we got a chance to do this. And you obviously
Yeah.
traveled back safe, so got home safely from
We met
December.
in GalaxyCon in Columbus, Ohio.
That's right.
A month ago, about 2 months ago.
A month and a half. Yeah. Right. Beginning of December.
Tristan, you met him first in July.
Yeah, late July.
Yep. That was Terrificon, right?
Yeah.
We were trying to figure out before we forgot when it was first announced you were doing Black Armor, and me and Tristan were having a group call with some other friends when I was visiting someone else in Mexico, and we were trying to figure out, because like Tristan was just like, hey, he's back, and I was like, Chichester.
I think it was right around because I knew Tristan when we saw each other in Connecticut, obviously, but you're not supposed to talk about these things. They make you sign contracts that say you will not, under any circumstances, reveal, disclose, et cetera, et cetera. So I was being pretty cagey and just trying to game out. Okay, when are they going to announce this, or when are we going to announce this, and then Marvel just blew the the news because they just announced it at a retailer only session, big air quotes, at San Diego Con. And, so it was a session only for retailers. But in this day and age, what does that mean? Everybody's there with a cell phone and they're all capturing bad PowerPoint slides. And so I don't even know it's been announced. And I'm getting Twitter messages from people. It was Alex Segoro is the first one I got it from. And he was like, hey, congratulations. And I'm like, congratulations for what? And then, tracked it back and saw, okay, so that's the news. So it was slightly after Terrificon, whenever San Diego was. So probably a little later, July, early August, something like that.
Well, first kind of a little basic question, just how do you feel about the finished product of Black Armor and the general reception from
Um,
fans and folks?
I, I feel really good. I mean, the last issue's not out yet. That comes
Yeah.
out Valentine's Day with a special roses bouquet instead of a variant cover. No, that would be a great gimmick though. Um, but I feel I'm really thrilled with the way it's turned out. I'm very happy with what I've done. I'm extraordinarily happy with what Netho Diaz, the artist, has done. I think the whole thing delivers on what we set out to do. And I normally did not feel that way often about things that I had worked on in the past. I always had a little bit of imposter syndrome and sort of like, oh, I didn't really quite make that work, or I wish I had done something differently, or boy, that didn't read as well as I'd hoped it would. And here I sort of feel that it is exactly what it set out to be. In fact, a little bit more. You know,
Mhm.
it set out to sort of be this retro 90s vibe adventure, if you will, and yet it unpacking it, it becomes a little bit more than that. If you guys have been reading it along the way, um, you know, there's this little father-son sort of thing that's gotten spun out in the opening sequence with the flashbacks, and that's become something of an interesting undercurrent of a theme. And there's a larger quote unquote armor theme that sort of plays out a little bit, not in a heavy-handed way, but these things weren't really, I would say, thought through at the beginning. They weren't really intended at the beginning, but I think as we got into and enjoyed the book more, and we're just having a good time with doing it, especially for my part, they got invested into it, and that's a really fun thing. I think that gives you the sense that you've done good work and you've allowed the characters and the story to kind of talk through you. So I'm really happy with it. Response, Marvel doesn't tell you numbers, so I couldn't tell you what it sold. We've gotten a couple of really good reviews. We got a bunch of really good reviews on the first issue. We got a really strong review from at least one place on the second issue. I don't know if there's any reviews on the third one, but the first issue reviews were really strong, especially from a couple of places that started off with, I was really sure I was going to hate this book. And instead I really liked it, which I did not take as a left-handed, you know, compliment or insult. I was actually pleased to see that. And you know, I've conversed with people on social media and Twitter or whatever, um, and um, and gotten some feedback there, which is a little bubble. And you know, I had seen people in Columbus, you know, in person. The book had been out maybe 2 weeks then, and so I was polling people as they came by. Did you read it, and so forth, and the reaction seemed to be very positive. I think the vibe I'm getting is that it's been well received, but you folks are out there in the, you know, sphere. What's your sense of it? I'd love to know that too.
So it's funny that you mentioned one of the reviews. There are a couple people who were sure they were going to hate it. I was
Mm-hmm.
not the biggest fan of your original run,
Mm-hmm.
but um, but then with this, you know, it got announced, and then I met you. So then I was
Mm-hmm.
like, oh man, I met DG. He's a really cool guy. I hope I like this. But I was, you know, a little worried, and like I feel, you know, my brain kind of was like, I don't know. He's cool anyway, so even if it's not the best, I'll still like it. But meeting you aside, it's great. It's awesome, and I think
Thank
it.
you.
Yeah, and every I feel like every thing that, you know, I'd consider like a problem, or something that I didn't personally like for my Daredevil books from the original run, I feel like not only like those things aren't just gone, but they're refined in a way where it's still like, no, this is DG Chichester writing Daredevil again. It's just
Mm-hmm.
30 years later and better.
You know, it took me 30 years to get it right. No, I appreciate that, Tristan, a lot, and I think I would have been the first loudest critic of my work in any capacity. And I always felt like I put my all into Daredevil.
Mhm.
And I had a lot of because I really enjoyed the character and I really enjoyed the opportunity. Um, and and I would try to put a lot more into it than just, oh, I'm writing a story, right? I'm just yeah, oh, I got to do this adventure, of the month or whatever. Um, but I think there were certainly instances where I overreached my ability, if you want to say it, like kind of like I try to pack too much into it, or I try to like play with themes or set things up, and I just didn't have the right skill set. There's a great quote by a guy named Ira Glass. Do you know Ira Glass at all? Do you know he
No.
ran a show on NPR. I don't know if it's still on there. Um, and and he's got a great quote. I'm going to mangle it. We could look it up and get the right idea of it. But the quote is essentially that when you're young, you have taste, right? And you have good taste about things, and you try to reach for that, and you can't get it because you don't have it yet.
Mhm.
But if you let yourself fail, um, and step away from it because you don't get to it, you'll never get to it. But if you keep kind of pushing through, you ultimately get there. And I badly mangled it. He said it much more eloquently. But I could point to some bits of Daredevil in the past and say, yeah, that works really, really well. And I think there are a lot of those moments. And I think there are moments where there's things that I was trying to accomplish. There's more packed in there, and there's interesting themes, and then there's places where I stumbled badly. Um, and the nice thing about this, for me at least, I don't feel I stumbled at all. I felt like I was really
Mhm.
happy writing it. I was not. I was very confident. I've got 25, 30 years of experience, not necessarily writing comics, but having to write in a very disciplined environment and under very high pressure situations. And and I always called what I did storytelling, even though a lot of other people didn't always prescribe that definition to it. But that's the way I always looked at it. So I think um, when this opportunity came up, it was a way to channel all that. Not channel a story I'd been waiting to tell,
Mhm.
right? It wasn't like, oh, I got this Daredevil story and I must tell it. I thought I was done with Daredevil. Totally. There was no expectation this was ever going to come up. But when it did, and then they kind of said, "We want you to tell this, you know, we want you to tell a story with this costume," which I never would have picked of any angle because of the grief we kind of took for the costume. Um, it almost became, well, nobody else can own this story because this is like my little zone, right? This is my little playground right now. I would really love to find out that this book did well enough and people were jazzed enough about it to sort of now want to go and play with that version of the character more, like to show up like more things with this black armor because it looks really cool. And there's been so many like variant covers, which is a ridiculous sales device. But there's been a ton of artists now who've interpreted this version of the costume and the character far more than have happened over the last 30 years in the last 3 months, which is really neat. It's fun. So, but I'm glad to hear that that's your read on it, and
Yeah.
I totally appreciate that.
Yeah, and even you kind of just described my issues with your previous stuff, and that's something too. I maybe at a certain point before looking more into, it was easier to be like, oh, I didn't like this book. Blah.
Hmm.
But looking more into, it's like, oh no, this is a person who was working towards a story, and even with some of the stories, you said like a little overpacked, like something like Fall from Grace, that, and partially it's probably just like a comprehension error, but sometimes there was just a lot going on. But even with that, it's like there's little things I like I love the moment with Matt and Venom, where he just kind of talks Venom out of the story, where Venom's like, no, I want the big like the virus
Hmm.
that like that'll fix my weaknesses to sound and fire. And then Matt's like, as a disabled man, he's like, Venom, our imperfections are what make us beautiful. And Venom's like, yeah, you're right, and then just leaves. And like,
Peace out.
moments,
Yeah.
yeah. So, yeah, even like, I've always had a preference for like good characterization in stories, and I think whenever it comes to that, you've always been great. And
Thank you.
yeah,
And,
even with yeah.
I'll take that. I take that to heart, and I do believe that. I do believe I was always character driven in those situations, and even here, this book is like, I mean, intensely action packed. I mean, Netha was again just a great visual artist and a great visual storyteller, and this last issue that just came out, number 3, I was literally exhausted by the time we finished scripting it in a good way because, and I knew it was going to go on. It wasn't like, oh my God, how am I going to do this? I just meant I kept turning the page and was like, how is all this in one issue? Like, there's so much going on. Um, but I still think we got character elements in there, and I think it still comes through in the important ways. And somebody did a review of A Fall from Grace. I can't remember off the top of my head the name, but it's a really interesting review because he compared it to the Frank Miller project, the John Romita Frank Miller project that came out at the same time, which was Man Without Fear, which is a great book, right? John Romita Jr. and Frank Miller writing it, and I had, at the time, Scott McDaniel and I were struggling to get attention on Fall from Grace on the regular Daredevil book. They were putting all the promotional money up against the Miller project, kind of like the sure thing. And we had to actually pay for some promotion on our own, but that's not the point of the story. The review, said, the Miller Romita project is a good book. It's a really good book, a really solid book. But in some ways, he enjoyed Fall from Grace for all of its many warts and imperfections more because he knew we were throwing everything we possibly could at it. Like the other guys could do a great job with the skill set and the fact that they were John Romita Jr. and Frank Miller and it was Daredevil. And we were the underdogs, and we were having to kind of go hog wild of this jambalaya of a story. Yes, it was packed and it was overpacked. And it would be interesting to kind of go back and rewrite it, rescript it.
Mm-hmm.
Much as it might be interesting to go back into Black Armor and write it like the old me, which would be horrible. We don't want to do that. But anyway, there's a lot in there, and there's a lot of good stuff in there. But as you said, some of it is comprehension, and some of it is this tendency to sometimes fall into a comic book thing of overwriting and what do you need to describe. And there were places I found myself falling into that bad habit with this, and I would just walk away. I would just walk away from the keyboard and wait until I was back in this very chill zone I felt to kind of be in the right place, and instead of having to rush through it. And again, it's better for that.
Do you kind of, I mean, I still haven't read your main run, so I'm kind of in the dark with some stuff.
You read Last Rites, though.
I've read,
Last Rites. I mean, Last Rites 304. Read 304. It's a really good one.
That's always on my list. Story. If people are trying to breeze through the 90s stuff, I'm like, read Last Rites 304.
Yeah. I mean, Fall from Grace can be a tough slog, Shay. I'll be honest. Elektra, Root of Evil is really good. I would recommend that. That was a mini series that was just about Elektra. I think that hits all the right notes. But I mean, a lot of people hold Fall from Grace dearly because they kind of were younger and they kind of came into it at a certain point, and it hit them with the action and all the guest stars and the costume, and it was an event. But I'm the first to admit it is, it can have its tough moments. Tree of Knowledge, I think, is actually excuse me, which was the follow-up story. I think is a more solid story altogether. Like story-wise, structure-wise, pacing-wise, comprehension-wise, even though it was also dealing with a lot of bigger ideas. but but it wasn't everybody's cup of tea either because I was starting to play with like cyber stuff and things, and I don't think people were quite into that for Daredevil at that point in time.
Do you, though, with doing Black Armor, and really especially kind of like the heavy focus on the Jack Murdoch side of things and sort of the flashbacks with the boxing, and then in issue 3 you have the thing with the is it Strucker von Strucker, what I
Baron
got
von Strucker, yeah,
Baron von Strucker doing like the firing thing. Was that at all a thing that you just kind of fell into, sort of centering the book around thematically, or like you kind of thought like for a miniseries that's kind of what you'd want to focus on exactly?
It was a very organic way of arriving at the story. Again, my first reaction when I talked, CB Cebulski, who's the editor in chief of Marvel, approached me at Terrificon the summer before Tristan we met, and he'd introduced himself, and I jokingly said, "Oh, CB, nice to meet you. It's been meaning to send you these proposals I've been working on." And he turned around and said, "Well, actually," and then talked to me about the fact they've been doing these nostalgia books and these nostalgia series, and would I be interested in maybe doing something? He didn't really say what, but I figured 98% chance it's going to be Daredevil, right? It's not going to be one of my fringe characters, even though those would be fun to work on. But um, and then I followed up with him. He got right back to me, pretty much, and put me in touch with Devin Lewis, who's the Daredevil editor, among other things. And Devin and Tom, the associate editor, the initial conversation was super loose, right? And it was just like, hey, why don't you just, but the first thing was, we want you to do a story with the Black Armor, which we took a lot of grief for back in the Fall from Grace days. We took a lot, and this is pre-internet. This is pre microsecond troll being able to show up and tell you exactly what they think of you. Which is why I think maybe the response to the book has been positive, because I sort of feel like if it had been horrible, I would have heard a lot worse,
Yeah.
a lot more. But so I laughed and I said, we took a lot of grief for that costume. People didn't like it. They didn't like the fact we changed the costume. It was a Power Rangers. Why does Daredevil need armor? So I laughed, but he said, no, we're into it and we want to do it this way. So I started to wrap my head around that, and then they just sort of threw out big ideas. They said, take a swing at characters you haven't played with before. Throw him up against threats he hasn't been up against before in the same way. Um, very loose suggestions, but encouraging. Like, just go and do something, right? I don't know. So it was just it was that August. It was like a hot August afternoon. I was sitting out back in my place, and it just really. I could send you the initial like kind of free form thing I wrote out, and it's probably about 80% of the way there. It's probably 75%, 80% of the way. The bones of the story, like the basic bones, um, and but it didn't have the father son thing in it. It didn't have the flashbacks in it. It didn't have those types of elements, baked in. It was more plot driven at that point. Like, what if he does this, and what if he's here, what if this happens, and maybe there's Melvin Potter shows up and does a inspection of the costume and thinks it's horrible, and these types of a lot of elements, a lot of sort of things just kind of channeled in. And I do sort of believe that if you sort of like leave yourself open to listening to characters and listening to stories, they sort of tell themselves to you. And then it was only as I started to write it, and after Devin and Tom had looked it over, and which was kind of funny because they can be tough to get a hold of, and we've been trying to hook up on the details and of what I had sent in, and they were like, we got together and they were riffing on some other ideas. Well, maybe you should do this, and what about if you bring the kingpin in, maybe the hand, and maybe this? And I was like saying, okay, well, these are different ideas, and but I'm cool. I'll figure it out. And at the last second, I just said to Devin, but did you have any reaction at all to the outline I sent in? Is there anything good from there we can use? And he got really quiet, and he was like, hang on. And like, he's looking through his email, and he clearly had never opened it. Or he missed it or something. So then he like speed read it, and he was like, oh, let me read this more. And he read it, and it's like, well, this is really good. Let me read this in some more detail, but maybe we should go in this direction, which is ultimately what we did. Although some of the other suggestions from that conversation, like the kingpin scene in issue 1, there was no kingpin scene originally. Like their kingpin has no real place in the story. It's just a fun little scene. Um, but that had come out of that initial discussion. So things like that kind of came up, but the themes of what the armor means, that kind of came up a little bit more as I just started working on it. I had said to Devin at one point, do you think this is a story about the armor? Or do you think this is a story that just happens to have the armor in it? And he was like, it's probably just a story that the armor's in it. But as I got into it, like I saw like this little like sub theme of what the armor represents, which I feel like really solidifies as it gets to the end. And the father flashback stuff just really just kind of came up organically, probably because I was thinking about my own father a little bit, who had passed away a number of years ago. And I would say the line in this issue that just came out where he says, I have not seen my father's face for many years, but I imagine I could, and it's my father's voice I hear to guide me. I mean, I wrote that line as much for myself as I did for Matt Murdock. But that's kind of was interesting, right? I never had really played with Jack Murdock when I wrote the book before. Maybe a little bit, but probably not at all. And so I just allowed myself to kind of follow it, and that came together. And then it was my job to make it comprehensible and not just get lost in like all these things. So a lot of stuff got lost along the way too. And by lost, I mean edited out because it would not have served the story. Like, oh, it would be cool to have this side character or this side thing or this, dive down this little theme rabbit hole. But I became much more judicious about saying no to things in order to kind of keep the through line of the story true and approachable and understandable, because it goes nuts, right, pretty quickly, right, I think. In a good way.
I think it's very cool, after seeing a bunch of interviews and then talking to you, it's really cool, like seeing, not only how much stuff in general you can fit into the story, because there's also, there's some real fun character interactions here. Like Mole Man shows up, and I've been getting the Mole Man the past couple of months, and he's, Dr. Doom is great. Mole Man's my guy.
I love Mole Man. I love that so much fun.
As far as I know, him and Daredevil only interacted in the Wade run, so it's cool to see something else do that.
Mm-hmm.
But not only do you fit in all these really cool, great character moments that manage to be a cool thing that maybe you can slap on the cover, but also thematically cool. But I hear so much about you just sneaking in on these like little things about yourself, like you're saying now about like your father in the story, and I think that's really cool. Or even I know you touched on Maggie, Matt's mother in your run a little bit. Like, did that correlate to your mother?
No, not so much. My mother's still alive, thankfully, so I just drag her to the comic book stores now to get the issues as they're coming out, and she has consistently stolen the variant cover off the shelf and taken it for herself. So I've got none of the variant covers. She has grabbed onto the Eastman one, she grabbed onto the reflective one, and So all I have is the regular, covers. Yes, that's her role in this. No, the Maggie stuff was more, when I did that was probably just more riffing off the Miller work and such, as anything, and like kind of being a callback there. Because I think even at that's sort of what I use Maggie at the end of Fall from Grace, where he goes and says, "I'm going to assume this other identity," and what do you think I should call myself? And she says, "Well, I always like the name Jack," but and that gets played out. But even no, even I mean, for years, ever until this series came out, honestly. I mean, every time somebody would talk about this costume and they would call it armor, I would say I never called it that because I never did. I never called it armor because it wasn't in my mind armor. So that's me talking in issue one, where when Matt says when Melvin Potter says the Daredevil I knew didn't need armor, and Matt says I never called it that. That's me as much as that's my joke to myself, but it works for him as well.
I feel like with kind of all the little character interactions, and more so maybe even editorial being like, have Kingpin in there, have blah blah. Specifically with like just the one-off Kingpin scene, the one-off Melvin scene.
Karen's there for a second.
Karen, yeah.
Yeah, and they didn't. There were no edicts from editorial. I mean, I know there's editorial was super supportive. I don't want to cut you off, Shay. Please go on. But I just want to be clear. Suggestions, right?
Right.
And like run with it, do something with it, don't do something with it. So please continue.
Right. But it kind of it just kind of makes the world feel a little more alive, and then there's obviously some of the more what reminds me at least a bit of like Innocentes of the sort of almost community based aspects,
Right.
and it'll kind of, to me, it feels like a very kind of just for a Daredevil miniseries, like very just like quintessential. Like you have like everything you kind of want from Daredevil. And it kind of reminds me. I don't know if you've read at all Lee Weeks's Angels Unaware Daredevil miniseries at all.
No, I didn't even know Lee did one. Oh, I gotta go look
Yeah,
for it. Okay.
it was.
Yeah.
What was it? 2014, 2015, Tristan?
Oh.
Yeah, it was like early Wade because it's there's I think it was around the time that the Wade run was starting that there's like a bigger miniseries called like Daredevil Dark Knights, and every couple issues it was a different team. But there's a Lee Week story. It's 3 issues, and he did the art and the writing.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, he was doing a lot of. I mean, I think he might still be, but he was doing a lot of writing at that point. And I know he did some. I know he'd done several Batman stories. I did not realize he'd done a Daredevil one.
Yeah.
So I'll have to look for that. Was it?
Yeah,
I'm sure it was good.
Oh
I'm
yeah.
sure
It's
it's really good.
probably my favorite like Daredevil miniseries personally, like right next to like Daredevil Yellow for me, because it's just like
And this one, right? Shay, Black Armor. I mean, I
yeah.
don't want to
I'm
put words in
saying
your
it's
mouth.
I'm saying it's sort of reminiscent, and that it feels like a quintessential where like Angels Unaware for a person who wants to get into reading Daredevil comics, I'd say like start with Man Without Fear, Miller's Run. But somebody who just like wants to read like one Daredevil comic just to get the idea of it, that kind of be the comic. It kind of captures everything, and it's such like a
Right.
short, simple, good story. But I think Black Armor also does do that to a degree where it captures kind of some quintessential aspects, touching a just it's a miniseries, so not like a huge portion of it, but just little moments with characters like Kingpin or Melvin, or even just like a moment in like the church and stuff.
Right.
But then also it does kind of tackle some of the stuff with like Jack and some of the more boxer father aspects of Matt's character that I haven't really seen in like any other Daredevil comic, honestly. Like That's kind of the main thing that I love the most about it, along with also Netho's art being absolutely incredible.
Yeah, yeah. It's off the hook. It's definitely um very fortunate partnership and pairing. But yeah, I think the characters and the way they played out have been just the right amount, the taste of it without it going too far down, and giving the acknowledgement to sort of the world that is for this character at this point in time. I mean, that was probably the trickiest thing to navigate for me was, when I'd set up the whole Jack Batlin persona, right? Matt's mask, that
Yeah.
he's wearing. That was as part of my regular run of the book. So it was, I don't know how I was going to handle it exactly, but, it was all going to be part and parcel of the regular run. Now I had to kind of fit pick up on a corner I'd written myself into 25 years ago and yet make it work in a palatable way for somebody who might ostensibly be picking this book up for the first time. And but I'm pretty happy actually with the way it navigates. I think it gets a little tricky for some people. I've not read the reviews. I watched a couple of YouTube reviews, which are difficult to watch sometimes, because people are a little more rambly. But trying to kind of parse. Um, I don't understand. Is he Jack Batlin, the boxer, or is this identity? Or I don't think it's that confusing, frankly. But but I'm, the point I'm making, I guess, is that it was it all seemed to kind of work together well and set things up in a nice way to make it feel still very um, human for him and human for the community. I think that's what I hope to do.
Yeah. And I mean,
And I think no.
I was gonna say I also really love Von Strucker as a villain of being just essentially a caricature of, just the ultra rich, and I mean obviously he's supposed to be a bit of a analog to fascism and
You think?
Nazism,
You
yeah,
think?
a little bit. Um
But well,
I've
that's. Go ahead.
I love, normally, when people talk about like the best, villains and stuff, like it's normally characters that are also kind of like sympathetic, but I do also, it's nice sometimes to just see, especially just a villain that is just purely evil, but like is also like realistic, because like it's an analog to other people in history, um one specific guy in history, um
A couple
but
probably.
yeah,
Um,
yeah.
the Yeah, I mean Strucker's always been a little bit of a favorite of mine for different reasons, but uh and I personally enjoyed like the scene in two, where he just like rambles on, monologues on for like basically 3 pages, for Matt just to
Yeah.
basically tell him fuck you, just ring the bell. That was the plot version of that line, I think. Just fucking ring the bell. But um, but this is Tristan. I think this is like an example of maturity, call it or whatever. But I mean, I always did a lot of research for things I would write. Fall from Grace, the whole virus lost in the subway and everything, was based on a real CIA scheme that they had put some kind of aerosol through the subway system in New York, and no one knew what it was. And so I'd spun that out as this convention. Tree of Knowledge had all these real uh, virgin technologies that were being experimented on for what would become the internet and such, or what was becoming the internet at that time. But Strucker's interesting as a character because, at least the way I wrote him, even with that over the top sort of stuff, is I write it from his perspective, right? I don't, and from his perspective, he believes it all. right? I'm not writing him when I'm writing him as oh, I'm gonna twirl his mustache or whatever. I'm writing it as this is a guy who really buys into this. He buys into this 1% of the 1%
Right.
and believes in the superiority complex, beyond, and we're going to weed out the worthless and so forth. And there's a really interesting book that I had read before this came up, which ultimately dovetailed into this nicely, which is called Survival of the Richest, which is about all of these 1% of the 1%s who
Yeah.
fervently believe there's going to be something called the event or something like that, where all of us are going to rise up and or the climate's going to go completely out of control or any disaster that's going to get the masses to rally against them, and they are going to retreat to their bunkers and their space stations and ride it out, while we tear ourselves apart. Um, there's a lot of that in Strucker, you
Why do you
know.
think Elon Musk wants to go to Mars so bad?
Yeah, well, because he's a man child, but
Yeah.
the
Mhm.
stupidest thing in terms of space travel to do would be to go to Mars. But let's colonize and terraform a planet that has nothing,
Yeah.
as opposed to. Um,
Let's do that before
but
I fix our own planet first.
exactly right. If you can do that over there, you can do that here probably. But there's a lot. There's things in there. There's not direct lines, but themes. In this issue, the sharp blade that dominates and destroys. That's almost verbatim from like a philosophy of
Yeah.
some of these people, and that is just that whole sense of of we will do what we want, and if the rest die in the process, well, that's that's fine because this is the station in life. Like that's the way some of these people are, the way they feel. It's an interesting book, not a happy book, to read, but uh,
Kind
I
of
think
like
that's why the villain
survival of the richest.
works. Survival of the richest.
Okay.
Get it from the library,
Yeah.
support your local library. But I think that's why characters like that are fun. They're fun. They work for the story when they have that, some kind of attachment to reality. I'm surprised somebody hasn't, accused me of being too woke by making him the villain or something, but that'll happen. They'll happen if they
That's
actually read it.
yeah,
But they're
that's
not. Those people aren't smart enough to realize that you're being like woke because it's not straightforward like a woman or a black person as the main character. Because you're
I
directly
I guess
talking about rich people, and they don't fully
they
understand
don't
the
connect.
complexities of economic whatnot.
and that's also if people I'm hoping that doesn't become something that's gets said from idiots, but I'm sure it will be. But also, you could argue your work's always been woke. You've always, like you said, with the CIA stuff and Fall from Grace, like you bring up certain issues like that. Or I've seen, it's obvious in the work, but in a lot of interviews, you mentioned like even you kind of always been like ahead of the time with even like the place technology
Hmm.
it has in the world, and implementing that in stories like Tree of Knowledge,
Hmm.
or even trying to bring up to people however many years ago, like, hey, I think this is how we should approach some more internet based stuff when it comes to comics, and just getting a huh.
Right, and the inequity that would develop, and that was themes I took from other research, and you've seen that happen, right? The inequity between who has access to information and who doesn't have access to information. But um, I mean, I think the woke conversation around comics, which is just insane, you know,
Yeah.
red meat around things,
Mhm.
is often just around like comics. Any good story is about something. It's always about something. It has to be about something. And if you are
They've always
taking a
been
position,
woke.
Right, but yeah, but if you're taking a position where you're trying to kind of address whatever issue, or support whatever group, or point out whatever flaw um, in something, the story fails when you decide to stop it cold as the creator and have the characters become your mouthpieces, right?
Right.
When your story expresses itself through the characters and what they do, and brings forward those issues, right, through what they do and how they react and so forth. um that's the trick, right? And I made that mistake in the past too. I've said, oh, this is something that's really important to me, and I'm gonna like just be this 2 by 4 like lecture about something. That's when the folks who just want to jump on stuff, I think, have their excuse to do that, because then they can identify it in a way. But,
Yeah.
but stories always have to be about something, and hopefully they're about the things that are more important to us as an overall community and an overall society and people, than it is about, I don't know, promulgating the status quo, or belittling something else just because that's an easy thing to do.
Yeah.
That's my soapbox for the moment. That was me speaking as a character, not
Yeah.
like, not doing it in a very good way.
Um, Another thing, just a little off from talking about comics specifically, that
Yeah.
I'm just curious about. Uh, on your Twitter, you have, just because I'm not educated on this stuff, a couple like retweets and tweets about like a church of like Satanism
Oh,
or
the
something like
Satanic
that.
Temple. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm curious on like what
Yeah, I
that is.
think
Like,
they're.
I don't know about that.
I keep waiting for somebody else to comment about that. You're the first person
Yeah.
like saying anything about
Yeah, your tweets
that.
are 50% Daredevil, 50% retweets of that. I'm like,
Like,
Satanic
interesting.
Temple. There was an interesting guy. It was funny. There's a guy who walked by. I think it was in Columbus too. And I noticed he was wearing like Satanic Temple pins, and I called him over and I said, is that what I think it is? And they're an interesting organization, because I think they're more. I don't belong to them. I'm not like a member of the Satanic Temple or anything. I visited it, and I've got some cool pictures of me sitting on the throne and posing with the Baphomet statue, me and my wife. But um, I think they're more of like a provocative organization, I get in my head, than they are an actual, like they're sort of like the libertarianism in a way.
right,
But I like the work that they're doing to kind of um call foul on like the BS about, well, religious freedom, unless it's a statue of Baphomet, or they've
right,
sponsored all these clinics for women to get birth control, or even abortions, and as necessary. They've sponsored these after school programs, for kids, and where many kids don't have after school programs, where they're teaching STEM or art or these things. Now they're doing it in a super provocative way, right? It's the
right.
little after school Satan's club. So they want to provoke, the Bible Belt in whatever. They want to get the attention on it.
Yeah, because
They
like
got
Satanism's kind of mostly. I mean, they they're getting what they want out of scared older Christian or Catholic people are like, oh, you worship Satan,
well,
and it's like, no, not like to a degree, sure, but like mostly it's a counter movement to the
well,
more,
that's it. It's a counter programming,
yeah,
to anything else. That's why I sort of said feels to me like it's a progressive libertarianism, like in a
right,
way, in the way it sort of represents itself. And it's not as um uh but I think that those things are necessary, to kind of be provocative in that way, and
Yeah.
and good for them for uh, like like raising the torch, no pun intended, in terms of Satan and hell or whatever, in making these issues something, right?
Yeah.
If they're providing, like I said, birth control or women's health or whatever, or states that don't have it or it's under threat, well, yeah, more power to them, in that way.
Yeah.
So Lucian Graves is the stage name or whatever of the guy who's the spokesperson or the leader of it. I think his is mostly the tweets that I I retweet, and I just think it's interesting. Like the whole uh, thing with whatever, I don't know. They had a statue, in some public space. I want to say Wisconsin, over the holidays, right? Here's the manger, here's uh, uh, the Christmas tree, and then somehow they got the state law to say, oh well, yeah, it's a state capital, so anybody can represent themselves. So they had a little Baphomet thing, and some
Yeah.
state senator had a flip out and like rips it apart, himself.
It's actively
Okay,
pointing
well,
out the hypocrisy
yeah,
when doing that.
exactly. Right. Or one state senator in some other place, made a huge issue of, well, there has to be religious freedom that we have in this country. It's very important. Or there must be a prayer, at the beginning, of every session. Okay, so then some, stooge for the Satanic Temple gets up and goes to read whatever their prayer is. And it's not Hail Satan, I don't think. I don't think it's like that, but it's whatever their credo is or edict is, and they either shut him down or they all walked out or both. So again, it's the hypocrisy, and they do these things as provocateurs. And especially in this time, you have to give people like that, I think, some
Yeah.
credit.
To ultimately
So I do it
raise
as
the
much for,
awareness.
yeah. So to me, it's like, okay, let people think about this. I don't think it's 50% Satanic Temple stuff, but
Yeah, I'm
maybe it
sorry.
is. If you've done a statistical analysis, I'll take your
No,
your word for it. But
hyperbole.
certainly when I see it, it's like, oh, that's kind of interesting. But I think there's other stuff
But
about other crazy
Yes.
things in the world.
yeah, and I think too, like it's it must be so easy for the bigoted to see something like that and just read Satan, bad guy. Uh, the way that you were talking about it kind of reminds me of like the Black Lives Matter movement, where then people are like, "Well, all lives matter. You don't think all lives matter?" It's like,
Right,
no,
right, right,
that's you're
right,
missing the point with that. And it's
right,
like,
right.
people
Yeah,
love
and how?
bigots love to make an
Right,
enemy.
right, right. And that's the people are in their bubble around things, and it's, if you can raise the awareness around how do you break the bubble, or if you could do a story that sort of gets people to think about things in different ways. And sometimes you have to lead people around the long way. My people in my family, have expressed that there's no such thing as white privilege. I don't have white privilege. I don't have white privilege. That sort of thing, right? I wasn't given any handouts or chances. And then the 2 by 4 horrible example is, well, you've never, if you're looking around a room full of white people sitting around a table, it's like none of us are ever going to have to be worried about being pulled over,
No.
right? And in a car and have to worry that we're going to be shot, in that moment. Not a single one of us. And that's where you kind of get people to have to understand that that's what's being referred to. That's why it's Black Lives Matter, right? Not like, oh, we need special attention over here. Yeah, you need special attention over there because of those kinds of, issues. Or, I went out to dinner with, a good friend and his wife a couple weeks ago, and George Floyd, came up, and he was talking about, and he's a good guy. He's a guy I've known most of my life. And but he was saying, oh, I watched some videos, there were different angles on the cop, it wasn't all this, whatever conspiracy, video, might have been made to sort of like deflect away from it. I said, all right, just give me 15 seconds of your time. That cop was on the force for how many years? 20 years, 25 years. You know, he's a decorated veteran cop, right? All right. No matter what goes on, he should have known to walk away at a certain point, right? He exerted the the force necessary, you know, for that. He wasn't on the force for 1 year, 6 months, you know, where you might have quote unquote excused it, you know, in that sense. And that's where it like becomes, you know, something. And that friend of mine, you know, was like, oh, I hadn't thought about it like that way before. You know, so sometimes, you know, you go around that way and you do the same thing, you know, to get off the heaviness of the subject, you know, but important subjects. You know, those are things you would write stories about, right? But you'd want to do them in ways that were not a character suddenly, let me lecture you about this. You know, let's do a scene where we demonstrate this. You know, where I'm going to put you in a chokehold or something. You know, character A to character B, and I'm going to show something like this. And, you know, and then maybe you don't necessarily then have that lecture again at the end, but the incidents themselves illustrate something, and then gets the audience, you know, to think about it differently. So, but me retweeting, you know, Satanic Temple stuff is probably more the 2x4. But I don't know that you noticed, so maybe other people noticed too.
Well, it's your
Maybe they
Twitter.
don't think I'm a Satanist. I don't know. It's my Twitter. I do what I want.
Yeah, you can do
Yeah.
Well, Elon tells me I can't.
You gotta pay $8 for it.
They did.
Yeah.
They did censor my one tweet the other day. It was like one of the stupid.
Oh,
It was one of the just the promotional things, you know, about Daredevil, and it was like something about Baron Strucker saying, you know, I will apply violence to this problem, or you know, it's like some mustache twirling thing, and it was flagged for promoting violence or whatever. It's a friggin' comic book thing, and he's talking
He's the
about
villain.
he's the villain.
You
That's
can't.
why
You
Elon didn't
can't-
like it. He was like, "That guy's like me. You can't make him look bad."
You
Exactly,
cannot
exactly.
show the scene of Thanos snapping his finger and killing half the people. People are going to try to do
No.
that now.
Right. Only if I snap my fingers, I want to do that.
Yeah.
Reduced by the Tesla workforce by half. You know, like boom, done. Gonna lay off 50% of the Twitter workforce. Done.
Yeah, I'm never calling it X. He can't get me to.
I can't do it. It you know, and the fact you if so long as I can type in twitter.com and it redirects, you're not taking this seriously. It's
Yeah.
like, if you change the whole URL structure, and I have to type in X, maybe I'd consider it. But as
Yeah.
long as you have that backdoor for me, then I'm good.
And it's also it's
And-
one letter, so if you start
Yeah.
typing, then you're just going to get a bunch of.
Exactly,
Get
bunch
this.
of rando stuff. Yeah, you're
Yeah.
probably you're going to be off at like Pornhub in like no time. At all.
Yeah, and a website I don't want to be on in public.
Exactly. Exactly.
Yeah. Yeah, and you know we can get back to Daredevil, but just another silly thing with X. Did you see? And this was a while ago, but at a certain point on the Twitter building, Elon had them put up like a big like X logo.
The giant thing.
Yeah, and it was hideous and so bright, and then it was like strobe lights, and they had to take it down within like less than a week.
That's right. That's right.
It's
The
so
neighbors
stupid.
were complaining. It was like a halogen runway light bright. It was crazy. Yeah.
Yeah.
And he'd done the usual tech billionaire lord, you know, no permits, no permission, you know, just I will do it, and therefore they will let me get away with it. I mean, that's why you know, you channel this stuff into a Strucker. It's almost like Strucker can't go far enough, right?
Yeah.
It really is this sort of disregard for you know, for people, you know, that is just so eye rolling and demeaning. And every generation seems to kind of do it, you know, worse and worse.
Another
it's
even I
funny.
kind of. I'm sorry.
It's funny because like you have the main Daredevil villain of Kingpin, who's like can also obviously be a analog to the rich and political controllers and stuff.
Sure.
Then when you also, but then you got Elon, and he's so silly. You gotta use a character like Von Strucker because you can't have Kingpin be that silly. I mean,
Yeah.
you know,
I'd still rather have dinner with Von Strucker than Elon, though. I think it.
yeah.
At least he's got a funny little bald head.
He's got a little
Exactly,
silliness
a
to
little
him.
monocle. He
Yeah.
carries along with him.
What are you gonna
Oh
say,
yeah, but the with the the lack of care for life even reminded me too. Not only did Elon put the giant logo on top of the building, but without checking in with anyone, he had workers remove the Twitter logo from the building, and then police had to stop them because it was like, this is a hazard. A letter could fall off the side of the building on someone, and he just hadn't put
But what
any
did
thought
they
into
do?
that.
They hadn't like fully disconnected the Twitter name. I didn't even see
Yeah,
that
because it
part of
was
it.
like,
So.
I think it goes like, it was like a downwards thing. So like, TWI, like it went down, and they were taking like one letter one by one because it was just like on the side of the building because that was the old one.
Oh, I see. I see. I
So he
see.
had
Okay.
had that removed without any permission, and that had to get stopped.
It's like a preschool children's cartoon. Like, no, someone could die. This letter's gonna fall on them.
They shouldn't have been there. They shouldn't have been there. They should have known better.
But okay, I think we've got the bigotry discussion out of the way. I mean, unless you got more to say, because this is fun. Daredevil, well, whatever.
Yeah,
Cool
Daredevil,
talks about
but
weird rich people with DG Chichester. Yeah.
let's go for it. Let's go for it.
But unless Shay, do you have more to say about that before I bring up Daredevil again?
No, it gets a little exhausting at a point to do.
Yeah. But I do. Yeah, it's just but that's just another thing that is just such a amazing and high quality and like improvement that you could fit in all these characters, but you still have great story stuff. Like everything we talked about for the last 20 minutes is the kind of thoughts that you want to provoke with this story, and it's worked because now we're talking about it and stuff, and it's just it's great in that way, and it's cool too. Something I really like, and I haven't really read too many of the nostalgia series, so I don't know the quality of the others, but with yours it's really great because it's a story that you could only tell in something like this, and not just because the black suit. Oh, which I will say that was never something I had a problem with. I like that suit, but I
was fine with it. Yeah, but
but not only that, but like just some of the character interactions. Like it was funny before it had come out when it was getting a little closer. I remember having this moment with Shay where I was like, "Wait, Shay, there's a chance that we can get good Karen Page in a Daredevil comic in 2023 when she's been dead for over 20 years."
I know. When I heard
it's
she'd been killed, I did not know that for the longest time. So
yeah, that's actually, I don't mean to toot my own horn, but I have I make YouTube videos about comics, and I'm kind of talking about why I don't really like that too much. But it's more so to put another book that came out afterwards up. I don't care to make a video that's just why I don't like this book, because that just feels too demeaning. But
right. But you were saying Karen, you get some Karen Page in 2023.
Yeah, and it's
And
cool
Melvin.
moments like that. Yeah, Melvin. I know we had brought it up at GalaxyCon, but he doesn't really show up too often in Daredevil comics, so it's great to see him. It makes me happy. But something else that blew my mind, and I felt because Shay, because Shay knew that the third issue was coming out right before the interview, so you waited till this week to read issues 2 and 3.
Yeah.
And I was going crazy because Crusher Creel is in the issue 2 flashback. Am I correct?
It seems he is. I mean, I did name the character Crusher. It is kind of Crusher-esque. I mean, I didn't put as much thought into it as other people seem to have put into it, but now that people have kind of leaned into it more, it does open up some interesting possibilities. I sort of treated it more as like just an aside, without overthinking it. It was just part of the surround of the world and the locker room and the gym and that type of thing. But some people seem to have gotten a bit excited about, well, that means, he knew Matt, and who knows how else you could have helped him out or something,
Uh-huh.
which is all a possibility. So I
Yeah.
guess it sort of opens your mind to different ideas.
Yeah, it is, I think, really cool too. And obviously, like you said, it's just a little thing. I'm not expecting him to help win the battle in issue 4, but
Right.
it is really because I've never seen, like, it's just, read every issue of Daredevil. I've never seen anything explore the possibility of, well, what if the guy that Jack was supposed to lose to was also a good person?
Hmm.
And it's cool to just see a little bit of that here, and it's like, oh wow, that makes me feel different because I feel like you're led to believe like, oh well, it was a fixed fight. The other guy was evil and in on it, but like,
Right, right. But
you
wouldn't
don't
that be
know.
much more interesting if, like,
Yeah.
there was each, some moment, or there's turning moments, right? And whatever Creel was going to become or do something. There was a fun story I wrote for What If. It actually holds up really well, I think. But I should have turned going back to it. But it was I had called it What if the Kingpin had adopted Daredevil?
I read that
And
today.
oh, did you? And they
Yeah.
changed the title to, like, what if the Kingpin owned
Think like
Daredevil or something
owns
like that?
Daredevil.
Yeah,
Yeah.
which
Like that's what's on the cover,
um
I think.
yeah, yeah, yeah. I think on the inside it's still adopt it,
Yeah.
but that was, I remember that was, at least in my mind, it was an interesting story to play out because Fisk isn't really, he's a mob boss's character, but he's not bad. Certainly not bad
Hmm.
to Matt. He sees Matt's potential. He understands what Matt is, and not just in a totally manipulative way. Maybe more like what they were trying to do with Echo, in the TV show recently. And so I think there's a lot of that too there. That you could explore more about. What was a Crusher Creel character like, without it all having even to revolve around that one fight. I mean, I'm not interested in sort of doing, and not that I'm going, not that there's anything on the table to kind of go back and play with anything else, but I think you make a mistake where everything has to be around these seminal events, right? It doesn't all have to be centered around, like, these Back to the Future moments of, oh, you're right there at that time, so that's the turning point in time. It's sometimes just fun to play and touch on these things lightly, and then if people pick up on them or it means something to you. It's like even the Fisk call forward in this to the mayor stuff, because I had read the Chip Zdarsky, run recently before this thing had come up. I had sort of, somebody said you should really read that. It's really good. So I'd read that. It's like, oh, Fisk is mayor now and all that. So when I got around to using Fisk, it was like, well, wouldn't that be fun if, like, there's a moment where, oh, Mayor Fisk, it's Mayor Goldie Wilson, from Back to the Future. It's kind of, it was just a fun thing, and some people seem to pick up on it, and but to me, it wasn't the whole story turned on that, and um, I don't expect anybody who's currently writing Daredevil to have Fisk say, well, you're the one who gave me the idea, you're to blame,
Yeah, and I
Fun.
think too, like you said with those seminal events. I think sometimes I've seen some discussion where people can get a little lost in it. Like, well, when is this in the Black Suit era? Is this before Tree of Knowledge or after? But
Oh
I
yeah,
think some of the beauty to the story is just he has the black suit, and that's all that really matters. It's some point
right,
around there, and I think
yep,
it's fun. That's I love just some of the the smaller scale stories like that. Born Again is awesome and stuff, but stuff like, or even like Your Last Rites is great, but then stuff in like 304 where I'm like, oh, that's cool, that could
hmm,
happen at any point, any time, and it's
right,
just stories
right.
like that are very great.
And I think that's the way my mindset just evolved around it, was just to sort of, and it's not, that wasn't trying to skirt the issue, but let's just assume there was a lots of adventures with this
Hmm.
costume, with this armor. There's lots of things happened that we just never told stories about, and here's one of them. And if they ever want to go back and do another one, they can, right? And there should be this license to sort of say there was many different stories, not just this collection of three, now four, maybe five. The story Greg Wright had done, uh, and then it was kind of over because they decided to tear the costume to bits or whatever,
with
and
scissors.
it's scissors.
I mean, that's
Yeah,
sort of
that was
that's kind of the beauty of the bigger universe, Marvel, DC, whatever, where it's like you
Hmm.
have obviously always new comics coming out that continue the storyline, but like you also have like 60 years of past stuff, and like I think with doing more miniseries like this, like
Hmm.
it'd be good to do more stuff like that where you can just set anything whenever, because also the timeline doesn't, it's in universe, it's not actually been 60 years because Peter Parker would be 80 or whatever, but
Right, 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 right.
you can do so much because like I think especially if you look back to comics during like the 60s and 70s when you had like the comic code authority
Hmm.
a little more strict on what stories you could do. It's like if you have miniseries or stuff that then on what you can actually
Hmm.
do with those characters during that time. I don't know if DC does that kind of stuff much. I don't know much with DC comics, but at least Marvel, I think that's a
When you say during that
cool
time,
thing
you
to
mean doing like a series like this that takes place
do.
in this faux past, and then
Right?
having to
Yeah.
conform to edicts and morality of that time, that kind of thing, or
Yeah. Yeah.
okay,
I think-
okay,
Yeah. I think can be.
yeah. I mean, it's a interesting thought, but when I asked, okay, it's not obviously 30 years ago, then Devin was like, it's kind of like, like the 90s in Marvel are like 5 years ago, so, use a cell phone if you want, which I do at one point, but then you also have people walking around like they're, they just stepped out of a punk rock show or something. So, they're,
Yeah.
I mean, I think Netho captured this very Netho vibe of it's the 90s, but not the 90s, right? But um, but there's yeah, there were again there was nothing except encouragement, from the editorial team. There was no things of you can't do this, you can't play with that character, you can't say that. Um, you can't. The only thing was there was a villain switcheroo at one point because another editorial office said no, you can't use that because we're going to do something with that character instead, even though we'd already gotten clearance to do it. So I had to go back in and do some rewriting. But that's an internal, you know, interoffice thing like that. So um, I guess we got lucky, in not having to run into anything along those lines.
It's cool too. It's made me happy to hear and see it from interviews, and even now how just nice the editorial stuff has been, because I know with the original run it was a little less civilized with how you were let off the book and such. So it's cool
That's a
that
nice way of putting it. That's a nice way of
yeah.
putting it. Yeah, yeah. A little less civilized, Tristan. That's good.
Yeah.
I was describing as inelegant, but now I'm going to go with
Oh,
a
okay.
less civilized way of doing it. Yeah, that sucked. I mean, that was a very not the original editorial office, right? The Ralph Macchio, Pat Garrity
Yeah,
office.
it was the
Was
switch
with a long time.
afterwards.
It was a switch after that was a problem, and that's why this has been sort of I think I've said this, and you've obviously listened to some interviews, so I'm sorry if I'm repeating myself, uh, but this has just been like a gift to me. I mean, they didn't do this for me, but it really feels like I if I don't ever do Daredevil again, which I have no assumptions, like whatever, it's a much nicer way to kind of
Right.
sort of segue out of the character than last time, which was abrupt and messy and left me in a bad headspace and was difficult to finish the story that I was already partway through. Like everything about this has just been a way to kind of capture sort of the if there's a best of Daredevil, right? Of my version of Daredevil, like this is a way for me to kind of capture aspects of that with the way I write the dialogue or the way I treat the characters or the way I put themes in and put it through this filter of having a lot better writing tools at my disposal to represent those and just bring them forward. So I think it's just and I think that comes through. I think it comes through in the energy of the story, and what's coming off the page is a little bit of that, my own investment of energy into it.
I think there's like, there's like a beauty to this, like you can tell with reading it, but especially looking into behind the scenes, and to be on brand with Daredevil, it feels like you have been like born again, and it's just this really I had to.
It's a stretch.
I don't know. Listen, I was thinking about it for days. I was like, I gotta use that one. That'd be fun.
I got to get that in there.
Yeah. But what am I gonna say? You had a fall from grace? That's just mean and not true.
Oh, wow. See, you got
This was your last rites.
Fall from grace. Exactly.
Yeah.
No, that would be bad.
But
that'd be real. That'd be totally dead.
Yeah. This was your tree of knowledge.
Yeah.
But it's so great because before you got let off the book, and I don't even really, even if I wasn't the biggest fan of your stuff, I don't even really like the stuff they do afterwards. I feel like they kind of too quickly brushed it off, and I get oh, you're a new writer, you want to do your own thing, but it's like there are some pretty drastic changes, and just being, oh, I cut the suit up is a little, it lets you down a little.
That was
Yeah.
like I think I said to you in Columbus, if I didn't say it now, but I never read that issue till recently, and
Yeah.
so that was to me that you would waste 22 pages at that point. 22 pages on a nothing burger of a story like that. It's an insult to the readers. It's an insult to the character. And it's like, what are you doing? Like you Marvel editorial, big office, you approved all this. Like, this is your IP. Why not just basically have Murdoch sort of say, well, I don't need this anymore. I'm going to put this in the Daredevil cave, in essence, and just hang it up, in the back closet behind the secret panel, and never refer to it again. But somebody was obviously so angry at it, like viscerally angry.
Mm-hmm.
And and it was, who wrote that story? Warren Ellis.
Yeah.
And it couldn't be him necessarily, because he wasn't working on the book. He didn't continue the story after that. They brought in Mark DeMatteis for that. But he was obviously so charged up on, and I don't know Warren at all, except from his work, but I'm just going to channel English guy who's going to take the piss out of a story, which they were generally pretty good at, in one way or another. Like, I'm just going to go at this, and there's a lot of that. Like, how stupid! What idiot would bring this up? What a moronic thing to do! There's a lot of that in that story. It's just a waste of time, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, really silly stuff.
Yeah. And then even after that, there's the, like you mentioned, the DeMatteis, and that one's weird for me. I don't know, because it does, I think, some interesting psyche stuff. It definitely goes for a completely different point than you were going for with the costume, because they make it seem more, like you said, or like the kind of the reviews. Some of the reviews are saying it's like, wait, so does he think he's actually Jack and stuff?
Yeah, right.
And
like he's
I think there's
identity, right? Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but then also, and from DeMatteis, I've read Craven's Last Hunt and this, and I don't know about view changes, but there's also some like pretty transphobic elements in that story. So
there's
like
that character who's like a sort of and I like Mark as a person and as a writer.
Yeah, and like I said, I don't want to make any big critiques. This is a 30-year-old story, and I haven't read any work more recent than that.
But there's that character sort of like he always felt like a little bit of a riff on the Killer and Silence of the Lambs. There's a little bit of like sort of aspects of that.
Buffalo Bill.
Maybe I'm misremembering it. But yeah, there's some aspects. I don't know. I don't know what they were going for. I always thought the whole thing of Matt doesn't know who he is, and this whole thing has confused him badly. And I vaguely knew what had happened there, but I didn't read that story either for a long time. And
Mhm.
And I asked somebody recently, well, like how do they navigate him coming back? Like when he finally reveals to the world that he's
Oh,
Matt Murdock, and somebody says, well, he just basically shows up in court one day and says,
yeah,
"Sorry, Your Honor, I'm back,"
I'm
and
back.
that's it.
yeah,
So there was no like
yeah,
big kind of like nobody thought it through or cared to think it through, or so I don't know.
yeah,
Whatever.
yeah. It's just he mentions like Shield put him in witness protection, and they just never bring it up again.
Okay,
Like,
all right,
okay, yeah, it is
yeah. All right.
cool though. Have you read like the Brian Michael Bendis run?
Did I read any of the Bendis run? I don't think I did. I've read
Okay.
Mark Wade's run. I've read the Chip run. Um, I've read might have read a couple of Bendis things in between,
Mhm.
but nothing of an extended enough point, for me to kind of really stick with me. I think I
Yeah.
read some of the Brubaker stuff. I mean, it
Hmm.
was it was one of those like in and out things that would be all right. Um, if somebody said check it out, I would check it out. Or if it was somebody that I already admired, like Wade, then I would feel inclined to kind of do it. But I sort of said, well, I know what's going on here, right? And
Yeah. Yeah, and that's
but
fair. I just I'm sorry, you can finish.
no, I was just going to say, and I did not consciously read any of this stuff that's going on
Hmm.
now until I finished scripting the last one. So I just picked up the new the new one
Hmm.
just the other day um, because I was consciously not reading anything until I finished
Hmm.
scripting this.
Yeah, I brought that up because Bendis he kind of does and you see it, the fallout of it in Wade, but Bendis starts like the kind of identity reveal again, and it felt like someone, I mean, I guess him, was like, no one ever did anything with this after it happened with Chichester's run. That's something
Mm-hmm.
we should maybe bring back and explore again.
Mm-hmm.
That was a cool thing. And there's other things I feel like in different runs that I don't know if it's on purpose, but feel like people
Is
noticed
that
stuff that never.
was who did the whole "I am not Daredevil" thing? Was that Bendis or Wade?
That was Wade, but
Right.
that was after the identity reveal. So his whole thing is just taking place like afterwards. But Bendis was the one that has it get revealed.
Yeah, it's kind of the main
Okay.
through
Okay.
line of
I see.
basically every Daredevil comic since, in a
I
way,
guess. I guess.
the
Well,
identity.
that's and again, nobody will notice it and pay no attention to it, but or maybe they will. But that's why I personally like loved Strucker's whole like kind of thing. I don't give a shit about your identity. Like,
Hmm.
it was always the it was my own counter programming. Like, it was kind of like, just get rid of this. This is like nonsense, which, just opened up, partly it sort of opens up a little bit of an slight end element of the story, at least the way that Matt verbalizes it when you get to issue 4. But um, yeah, the whole identity thing is uh, is something that felt very important at the time, but feels much less important now to me.
Yeah, and then I think too, it's with the identity, and it's it's obviously it's kind of silly, but it makes a lot of sense for like Strucker to know, because also like I feel like from an exterior lens, like within the Marvel universe, Daredevil really isn't that special unless you know he's Matt Murdock,
Hmm.
because then you don't know about the senses, and that's the most one of the more interesting things. You don't know about the lawyer, but it's like from an outside perspective, it's like, oh well, he's just the hero, and he's in Hell's Kitchen sometimes. So I think it's cool to just kind of go past that and have him know.
Right,
Um,
right, right, right.
I'll also, and I think I mentioned this to you the first time I saw it, but I just the little thing I want to mention because I haven't seen anyone else talk about it. Not that I think I'm the first to notice, but I thought it was really fun in Fall from Grace that when, and I forget her name, but the character that goes through Ben Urich's computer and reveals Matt's identity, on his computer, like the stories that are there but were never like printed, it's the narration from old Miller issues. That's just a fun
Right,
little like Easter
right,
egg
right.
or whatever, and
Bring
I
it
like that
back
a lot.
through.
Mhm.
Yeah,
Yeah,
Sarah something. I can't remember her last name, but I think she was
yeah,
um She was based on somebody, I think. But but uh, yeah, but we spent a long time like rotating through all that stuff of that ambitious young woman, trying to wheedle her way, into Yurick's good graces so she could break into the computer and find that information. And this is her breakthrough story. And how are we going to run the Matt Murdock headline? It just felt like, parts of the overly elaborate like drama, when it could have probably been addressed in like one frame or one page, like Strucker saying like I don't care. You ever see the movie The Fugitive with Harrison Ford?
No.
No, see it. It's a really good
Okay.
action movie. But
Okay.
I won't.
An older one?
Yeah, it's from like the '90s,
Okay.
but
It's on the list.
there's a lot of great moments in it. But when you get to the Tommy Lee Jones, who's the U.S. Marshal who's pursuing Harrison Ford as a fugitive, who's been like wrongly accused of killing his wife, and but when you get to the scene of the dam, you'll understand the "I don't care" like moment of it. So I don't want to give it away. So it's
Okay.
a really good movie. So it's fun.
Another thing I'm curious about, from reading your sort of your newsletter? I guess you'd call it. Yeah, newsletter. I see one thing about you have playing some video games. And I think
Yes.
one thing about you playing Untitled Goose Game.
Yes.
Are you a bit of a
Yes.
gamer? What games have you played?
Yeah.
I played a lot of games badly. I impressed the hell out of my son with like one we were playing Uncharted one time, and I'm bad. I love the games, but I'm bad at them. But I performed like a 7.5 minute, like essentially a drunken fighting scene. Like, I'm trying to kind of like steer, like, like the character through it, and I'm stumbling and I'm shooting and I'm falling, and somehow, I mean, that game is just, free for all fun slaughter, right? Somehow I massacred like an entire squadron of people. And he looked at me afterwards like that was the most impressive thing I've ever seen, and with no skill whatsoever. It wasn't like I was planning it or I was really great at aiming. I was just the luck of it all. Uh, I, yeah, I mean, right now I'm playing a bunch of games poorly. What am I doing? I'm doing Tears of the Kingdom,
Same.
Dredge. If you play
Dredge.
Dredge is interesting. It's like
Is that an indie
it's like
game?
this weird. It's like it's kind of indie. It's like a fishing game where you're trapped in this weird Lovecraftian fishing village, and you have to go out and progressively capture weirder and weirder sea life, for
Oh yeah,
this
I've seen a trailer
strange.
for this.
Yeah, it's fun. It's a different, tone than that, than the other ones, obviously. I was playing The Outer Wild with my son, but
Oh,
he's away at
that's
college,
such a
so
good game.
yeah, we're gonna wait till he's back to keep doing that. I started playing Cyberpunk recently,
Is that
and
like
then
good now? I know it was pretty
yeah, it's
buggy at
good now.
launch.
Oh, when it
Okay.
came out, it was so
Yeah.
bad. I mean, I had bought it for my brother for PlayStation, and then and then I started reading all the reviews, and when I gave it to him for Christmas, I said, and this is like 2 years ago, right? I said, just bring it back. Like, here's the receipt. Don't even open it.
Well,
Like
didn't
the
they have to
reviews.
recall them for like
I think they might have
PlayStation
done that
4
too, but
because they
but
just didn't work on the
they
older generation?
yeah, but they leaned into it hard, and it's really it's a like it's everything the game said it was going to be, like visually,
Or like
like experience wise. It's not quite No Man's Sky, which completely
I was
redid
just gonna
itself.
say, yeah.
But they put a lot of effort to kind of reclaim ground and make it up, and then I just started not replaying, but well, somewhat replaying. I had never finished Grand Theft Auto 5, so I went back to the beginning on that. But I think that's enough. there's too many. That's already too many control schemes to remember. Like
Yeah, you got like 3 or 4 there. I don't
yeah. I mean, you just you just jump between the it's like, oh, X is this on this one, and then left triggers that on that one, and then you forget, and you're all over the
I
map.
normally have like one game I'm playing like on my Xbox. Like I just started playing I just beat the Arkham City for the first time.
Oh, that's a great game.
Recently.
That's a great game.
And,
I love that. That's one of the best representations of Batman, I think.
Yeah,
I would love to
I'm
see
like
more
excited to read Batman comics and be like this, like, okay, is this how's this similar to the game? But then I also just have like Tears of the Kingdom. I'll just play like an hour or two before bed.
Yeah,
I've been playing like 6 months. I'm maybe a quarter of the way through. I don't know when I'm gonna beat that game. It's so.
Oh well, that's kind of
I love taking my time though. I'm loving it. It's like there's so
that's the
much.
whole
It's
thing.
crazy.
It has that feeling. I mean, it reminds me so much of Skyrim. The first time I played Skyrim, and had no expectations or knowledge of it at all, and just the first time I sort of stumbled off the path, and I started going off on like side quest or side cave, or I literally forgot what the main quest was, and I couldn't have cared less. Oh, I guess I'm supposed to go get like a dragon thump something, but I was just wandering the land, and it seemed so big in comparison. But I think they said Skyrim was like the equivalent of like 14 miles, and Tears of the Kingdom is something like 42 miles, or so I don't know. I mean, I just started. I just hit the ground.
The skies,
yeah, you got all that
underground,
right?
So
yeah, the sense of vertigo is cool. I find my biggest problem with that game is is because it has that sort of like everything has that sort of pleasant Miyazaki-ish look to it.
Yeah.
I'm always assuming the best of things coming at me. Like, oh, look at what's that? That little thing flying. It's kind of glittery. It must be like a friendly little bird or something. Yeah. It's like, no, it's this evil ice bat coming at me. There's nothing nice that's coming at me, but it has these sad moments. Like what are those little leaf things? The
Koroks.
The Koroks, right? So the scenes where you've got the one pathetic Korok on one side of a river or something, and or whatever, and I can't get up. I'm a big bloated leech, or a beetle or something, and can you bring me to my friend? And I did it a couple times, and you got the reward. So I took this other one, and I put him on a raft to try to cross the river, but the raft got away from me, and he just like floated away down the river. And when I made it to the other guy on the other side of the river, he's like, well, where's my friend? I don't know what happened to him. Oh, it looks like he's way over in that direction. I wonder if I'll ever see him again. So clearly they wrote a line of dialogue for me.
Yeah. There's like I haven't seen him, but I know like especially right when it came out, so many people were just like attaching like rockets to them and just shooting them into the sky
like
to never
abusing
return.
the Koroks and like torturing the Ewoks in the early Star Wars games. I've always loved video games and often been very bad at them. But that doesn't take away my enjoyment of them. And I've been through every genre. Like whatever click and point, like adventures. First person shooters. XCOM, like strategy ones. I drift between them, pretty well. But that's my current mix.
I recently got a PS5 to play Spider-Man 2.
Mm-hmm.
And then but if it makes you feel better about your gaming skills, so then I gave my PS4 to my dad, and he's been very horribly playing the first Spider-Man game.
Yeah, if you have fun with it, it doesn't matter.
No, yeah,
it's frustrated.
It's great. It's funny too. Like he'll be stuck at something, and I'll be like, you can do this, and he's like, yeah, but I'm not gonna remember. It's like, okay, he's having fun.
Right.
Like even sometimes my lunch, I'll just sit down and watch him play. Or like the other day, he was halfway into the game and didn't know he could do stealth, and I was like, you can do that, and he was like, how? and then I got to watch him excitedly do his first stealth sequence.
Yeah, yeah. Well, that's there's some degree of this in Arkham, but it gets better in games like Tears of the Kingdom and maybe even Cyberpunk, I think. Where there is a prescribed path, which obviously they think you're going to do, right? You're going to put the bomb on the door, and you're going to blow up the door, and you're going to go through the vent, or you're going to do whatever. But some of them, it's like you can go wherever you want and do it whatever way you want, and that's kind of cool too. Like clearly there's certain ways that they want me to scale the cliff in Zelda.
Right.
But if I just want to build like a 40-foot long board, make a bridge,
Yeah, especially the
that I
creativity it
yeah,
incentivizes.
yeah, it's
Just
really
build stuff.
wild. I mean, my son started playing that before he went back to school, and and he played a game when he was younger called Banjo Kazooie, which was
I played,
you
yeah.
remember that game?
Yeah.
And um it was the third one. It wasn't the first one. It was but the third one was this wacky
Oh.
like build your
Like
like
that.
it was
Yeah,
like it was
nuts and
sort of
bolts.
yeah, that's it. And you could just basically build anything. So he really didn't care about what the game was. He
Hmm.
cared more about like building these weird ships and shapes and vehicles, and his cousins would look at him like, what are you doing? Like, this is weird. But he loved the hell out of that. And so I think he saw what was going on in Zelda, and suddenly was like, I want to build weird things again.
Yeah. And
That
that's why Minecraft is so popular, especially for
Yeah.
that
Oh yeah,
generation. It's like,
yeah, no, I mean,
that
I remember showing him Minecraft in early beta, whenever before 1.0, and
hmm
not being sure if he'd be into it. I had come across it because a lot of the work I had done non-comics was like in digital advertising and digital marketing, so I was pretty knowledgeable about things in that sphere, and it's like, is he gonna like this? It doesn't look as good as Banjo Kazooie. It's like it doesn't, it's super crude, and but much like you guys, he took to it right away because of that. I can do this. I can build this. I can, make this
Yeah.
my own. He just ran with it.
Do you know the Saints Row games?
Yeah, I played those a little bit, but they were I don't know, they were a little. I like the sandbox games, but it's a little too goofy, like in some places,
Do you
just
know
with
which one you played?
I I want to say three, maybe.
Okay, that makes
But
sense. That's when they start getting bad.
yeah. Okay, all right. I think it
So,
was like that. It was like it was either a demo or it was like it was on one of the
uh-huh,
PlayStation like free games or something like that. I didn't buy it, but
uh-huh.
I'd heard things about it and said, oh, it's kind of it's Grand Theft Auto-ish and that kind of thing, and it just didn't you know just didn't
Yeah,
click with me.
that's fair. But the first two are known for being pretty good. It's like generally accepted the third one is, but
Yeah. Okay. I
but
picked the wrong
the
one then.
but yeah, just you talking about your son with the cards and banjo. It's funny. My brother, in Saints Row 2, he loved the customization, and like he'd tell me
Yeah.
like he'd make a character and he'd make all these outfits, get halfway through the game and be like, well, I made every outfit, and then restart the game with a different character and make outfits for them. It's like
Yeah.
sometimes that's all you need with games. It's
Oh,
fun.
I mean, he restarts games all the time. Look, I would never restart it after I'm past a certain point, but he'll
Hmm.
just, I want to go back and redo it, and but he has the absolute focus or lack of focus and devotion, to it that I did when I was younger for that. So now I need to be more targeted about the time that I'm playing it, and not waste the time, and also not feel guilty about the time, because it's like, damn, I
Oh
should really be
yeah.
working instead of playing. But I
Uh-huh.
think I found a pretty good balance with some of the games.
yeah.
Yeah, I feel that a lot too. I kind of force myself like, no, I can only play a game if I'm eating, because now I'm only entertaining myself while I'm eat. That's not being lazy. That's taking care of
Yeah,
myself. It's like,
it's like sometimes it's like, I'll play for half an hour, I'll play for an hour, and that's cool. But then if you can At least for me, if I can give myself that time, then it works out well. Or then sometimes I'll look up and it's 3 hours later, but that's bad
Yeah.
too. So.
Well, that means the game's really good if it
Yeah.
makes you forget
No, it means it's
time.
really good, right? But it means like, oh damn, 3 hours. Now I feel really, really guilty. Before I felt a little guilty. Now I feel really good.
Pros and cons. Pros and cons.
But yeah,
Exactly. No,
I'd
exactly.
recommend Saints Row 2, especially online if you could, because it's
Yeah,
like 15 years old, but the servers are still running. Me and Shay have been playing it and having a lot of fun.
that's cool.
Yeah.
I will put that on my list, but I will probably get through some of the stuff I've got queued up before I get to that.
No,
Just
that's fine.
check the boxes on it.
Gaming
I'm
backlogs
playing like some
always
trippy like
so long.
narrative game, which I kind of come in and out of. What the hell's it called? I want to say Kentucky Roadhouse, but it's not Kentucky Roadhouse. It's a really trippy like narrative story game. It's Kentucky Route Zero, and it's
Oh,
like
I've heard of
I
that.
don't know if it's good or not. I guess it's good. I mean, it is good. It's definitely ambitious. It's probably like a lot like Fall from Grace, but I mean, it's you're a trucker and you're trying to make a delivery and you get derailed into this strange little town and these people are trying to direct you to where you're going, and then you're following this guy to a mine or this woman who makes weird television repairs, and suddenly you're in this bar and you're talking to the bartender for 15 minutes without anything really going on, and then there's some point and click adventure stuff and you have to bring somebody a flashlight, and so it's all these weird mix and mash of genres that is telling a story as you're doing this light level gameplay. So I totally appreciate the ambition behind it, but it's it's I I
Can be a bit
sometimes
of a
wonder what am I supposed to be doing?
drudge.
What's that? What's that?
Be a bit of a drudge sometimes. A little
Yeah, yeah.
difficult to
Like what am I doing? Or like what happens next? Or like I want to have at least a little idea for
Yeah.
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah,
like
it's
what
I feel like sometimes games could get a little lost in the gimmick. Where it's like,
yeah.
well, where's the fun?
Yeah.
Like even there's
No,
one
exactly.
game.
Where's the fun?
Yeah,
Yes.
there's one game I was looking into, and I realized I had it. I don't know if it was free at some point, but it's called We Were Here, I think,
We were
and it's
here.
like this online puzzle game. And I've never played it. I just saw that I had it, but I guess it's a puzzle game that you have to play online, but you can't be in a party or whatever while you do it. You have to talk through the in-game like walkie-talkies that you find, and like that.
Oh,
This
okay.
sounds interesting. I hope it's implemented well, because then
Wow.
it could be fun to play sometime with Shay.
Mhm.
That sounds. I mean, yeah. I mean, different ways of gameplay are always
Yeah.
interesting if they take you someplace. There's a cool game. Sounds like a cool game. It's not called Blink Your Eyes, but it's like. But the mechanism is you're like I think you're at death's door or something, or you're about to cross like
I think
over
I
into
know
the next
this.
life or something. Right,
I
and
think
every
I watched a
time you
video
blink
talking
your
about this.
eyes in real life,
Yeah.
like the camera
Oh
on your
yeah.
computer or your phone skips you somewhere, right? It skips you ahead, or it sounds like a really kind of interesting mechanic. I don't know how that works out in terms of gameplay, but I like the idea of trying that out. But I have to dig into it. But
Yeah, I remember
Yeah.
even a few years ago seeing a cool seeming game. I don't know how much fun gameplay there was, but just interesting narrative stuff that I think it's like kind of like supposed to represent like dementia. So it's like you play through these like it's like first person and these like casual little moments with like people and then as the game progresses, it's like they all start looking like the same like kind of like NPC, and it's like I don't know. It sounds kind of similar to the one you were talking
Yeah.
about.
that sounds wild.
Yeah.
I got to wrap it up soon, guys. If that's
Okay.
cool. Just notice the time, and but
Oh,
not that this is not a very fun conversation because it is.
I didn't even
But,
realize how late it was.
Yeah. But this is yeah. Yeah, and we'd love to have you again and talk about what it doesn't have to be Daredevil. I know I said it in the email, but I was like, I hope we get to talk to him about just random fun things too.
And we did. Look at this. So no, that's fine.
Covered the main
There should
details
be
of
some
Daredevil.
Daredevil.
Satanism,
What's that?
and video games.
Satanism?
That's the
Yeah,
main three
exactly.
things.
Video games, white supremacists,
Yep.
racism. I think we
Elon
touched on a
Musk.
few.
Yeah.
Yeah, Elon Musk. Got a little Elon Musk in there.
Mhm. Also,
It's a
just
good Thanksgiving dinner conversation.
Exactly. Exactly.
another one of the mundane things just before you go, because I'm always tuning into the
Yeah,
Chichester
of course.
chats, and I know that one of them ended with you
I don't know why
saying,
those guys do that. God bless them for doing it, but I like. Why are you guys doing this? Like,
it is a really cool idea though. But I noticed one episode you finished off with, I gotta go talk to a tattoo artist. Next episode, I see you got a little ink on you.
Oh yeah, no, I'm like, well, I was trying to get a version of this done forever, and it's not
Mhm.
exactly what I had in mind, but I kept going to tattoo artists and sort of like describing it, and they were like, either ghost me or they would, they would say, oh no, you can't, we can't, I can't do that. But it was like, so it's like this, you know, so it's like a typewriter.
Mm,
I can't quite turn my arm at that angle, but like, instead of paper coming out the
good idea.
top, you get the bats, going down, and then the bats go across the back of the hand. So,
Very cool.
which never felt like that complicated a thing, but I don't know. So I found this semi-local tattoo artist, and I described it to her, and she was like, "Oh, so like a vintage typewriter with like bats coming out of it." It's like, "Yeah, is that complicated?" She's like, "I can do it." And then so she was odd to talk to because she didn't talk for like the first half an hour, 45 minutes because she was focusing intently on doing it. And then she proceeded to tell me every personal detail of her life, way too much information, like on every level. But so we were there for about 4 hours getting it done. So I'm
Very
happy,
cool.
happy for that.
Well,
Is that your
thank
first
you.
one?
No, I've got
I'm
this
just
one, which is
I know.
also at an awkward angle to kind of turn to the camera. So it's kind of like it's like half a heart with a wing. And
okay. Yeah.
my wife has the matching one, so it's a very
Oh.
suburban couple tattoo where, like, if our arms are together, then it's a full heart with two wings. So
That's nice.
but we got that one done a long time ago, and then she went hog wild, and so she's got like 3 or 4 now, and so she's and priming for her next one, trying to decide between more flowers up her arm or a Godzilla tattoo, and I'm pressing for the Godzilla tattoo.
Nice. All right. Well, don't want to keep you any longer. Thank you for talking for us for
No, you're good. As long as you guys got
hours.
everything you need. I mean,
Yeah.
yeah. Good
I
conversation,
mean,
as I said.
if you're willing to come on again in a couple months, we'd be happy to have you too.
Yeah, no, keep an eye out. See if we have officially joined the temple. Probably not, and if there's any
Yeah.
other news
Yeah.
or anything related to comics or some combination thereof, it would be fine.
Yeah. We'll
Yeah,
set a 2024 checklist. Next episode, more tattoos. You're in the temple. New Daredevil book.
exactly.
Yeah.
A full, like, when all these things happen, then it would be a good time to have a conversation.
Yeah.
All right. Well, listen, this has been a lot of fun. I appreciate the invite and seeing you both. I hope you both stay well. And the way you guys travel, I may see you at a convention. I don't know if you're gonna. I was surprised to see you in Columbus, Tristan.
Yeah. You never know.
So I'll be in San Jose, I know, and somewhere else. I'll be in Hershey, Pennsylvania, and
Yeah.
then
Maybe the next
Dallas.
Terrificon if you're there.
No, I'm not going to be at Terrificon because
Oh, okay.
Terrificon was he had to move it so he wasn't conflicting with New York Con because New York Con changed their dates. So Mitch, who runs Terrificon, moved Terrificon to later in August, and then that conflicted with a commitment I had made with GalaxyCon to go to San Jose, which I'm disappointed by because I really like Terrificon and like Mitch, and it's nice to be in the backyard, but I thought it would be good to see some folks in San Jose, and then I think the other place I'm going is like I want to say Oklahoma City, but I think it's Oklahoma City for GalaxyCon as well. So I'm trying to wheedle my way into Heroes Con and and Baltimore, because every time I'm at Terrificon, it's like, hey, you going to Baltimore in a couple of weeks? It's like, I don't know. I'm like, why? Like, why would you automatically assume I'm going to Baltimore? Yes, you're going to Baltimore, but it's like, so I figured I'd try to get myself invited to Baltimore, but they haven't responded yet. So, but that'll
We'll see if we
plenty
can.
of stuff to do.
Yeah, we'll be
All
on
right,
the
very
lookout.
cool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
I'm sure I'll list something when I don't have any Daredevil Black Armor stuff to promote anymore. Then I'll have to do these like appearances. That's all I'll have to talk about. All right, be well.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, take care. Thanks again.
Bye.